used its Terrestrialization to resist Electric, as long as it can get its ability out.
And now is the time to head into this match, of course. Joseph Ugarte, not a stranger to these top cuts on the opposing end. Calvin, this is his first top cut and an opportunity with this Weezing to take this team yet another step. Starting off, Galarian Weezing, of course, that is the neutralizing gas to shut down the abilities on Joseph's ends of the field. But thanks to that ability shield on the Koraidon, you'll get your own. So Sun will be set on the first turn of the match. And Koraidon Grimmsnarl on the other end, you have some offense, and maybe you don't get Prankster screens, but you can still set those up at a delayed time.
Could try to get them up, but not until after Koraidon is attacked. Like you mentioned, Orichalcum Pulse is on, Hadron Engine is off. So Koraidon has a little bit more damage threat. Still, though, needs to use a Terrestrialization to avoid a Draco Meteor from the other side, that if it was super effective, you don't necessarily need Hadron Engine, you're still going to pick up that KO. So it becomes a Fire type and probably goes out on the offense.
And that is the Draco Meteor connect, but it's not going to be the super effective damage, but it's still the one-hit KO. That is Terrestrialization and the restricted Pokemon gone on the first turn of the match here for Calvin. That is a big momentum switch from the get-go on Joseph's side. Toxic Spikes, that's going to be good for the next turn, but your Koraidon got to do absolutely nothing.
Yeah, you have to imagine that Calvin expected that to go a different way. Maybe thought Koraidon was bulky enough to be able to take that Draco Meteor, that Koraidon would not have the training and offense necessary to make it happen. But instead, yeah, just an absolutely devastating turn, right? Uses the Terrestrialization and then still loses the restricted Pokemon and gains nothing out of it. Very rough. Dondozo hits the field, though, at least with Toxic Spikes on the other side. There's an opportunity to try to get these Pokemon poisoned and really focus on the Dondozo win condition. But for now, Koraidon needs to switch with locked into Draco Meteor, and so it's Volcarona coming in.
So you no longer have access to a lot of that powerful damage with the Koraidon being gone, but being able to see this Dondozo, this is them speaking to the other win condition of this team. Get the spikes, get the poison, slow things down, and watch the opponent slowly whittle away. Volcarona is already going to be poisoned from the swap, and of course, Grimmsnarl, that's going to be a fresh thing of poison. But when you talked about the importance of the Volcarona in this matchup, it's now on the field. And Grimmsnarl, even if it's not priority screens, will be able to get that reflect up in the face of the Dondozo, making sure that the damage coming out is mitigated.
Yeah, Joe, knowing that Poison Gas would have been prioritized there means it's not easy to bring in Tatsugiri on that turn. So Dondozo just protects itself, gives a passive turn that both allows Grimmsnarl to get the Reflect up and allows Volcarona to come onto the field safely. Now Grimmsnarl has done its job, gotten the Reflect up, and it's right back out to Koraidon.
And looking at this Koraidon as well, some of these Dondozos have something like an Earthquake to really be able to pressure a lot of damage. This one doesn't, so a little bit safe, but it's not actually going to be the Tatsugiri swapping in for the Commander into the Dondozo. It's going to swap in place of the Dondozo here. Now, a lot of damage into this Weezing to slowly whittle away the threat, but we're not going to see this more win con of the Dondozo Tatsugiri just yet. It's just offense on this turn. Strange Team into the Miraidon's good for about half damage, and with that poison, we'll bring it down to a little bit lower of a health, setting up about a third.
Looks like Calvin got some valuable damage out of that turn on the Strange Team and the poison, but it also looks like Joe saw that coming, right? If you're throwing the Fiery Dance at the Weezing slot, that's because you're not expecting a Tatsugiri to be there. So Calvin gets caught making that play, gives up a bunch of health on Weezing, trading some damage back, but is kind of quickly losing momentum. It's also always a worse position to have the Tatsugiri on the field without the Dozo than vice versa, because you can't attack with Tatsugiri on the turn that you bring in the Dondozo next to it, and so a little bit more of an awkward position.
And with that, you can start doing like more momentum and damage on a team. Like Joseph needs to get this damage out, right? Now it's going to be the Weezing leaving, so abilities will be active for them. So that's going to be Electric Terrain up, Dondozo hits the field, and this Pokemon, again, as you called out, since it's switching in this turn, yes, it's going to get all of its boosts, etc., but you're not going to have the opportunity to either go for an attack or protect. So unless there's things targeted into the opposing slot, this Dondozo is about to take a good chunk of damage.
Crucially, can't Terrestrialize a switching in either, so very vulnerable to Miraidon on the other side.
Ooh, the Draco Meteor, though, is going to be targeting into the other slot, so nothing from that Pokemon. Fiery Dance into this Dondozo, though, not the most damage that we're going to see coming on out, but this Dondozo at any point in this match, since we did see the Koraidon on the very first turn Terrestrialize, doesn't have access to that, so you can't even play any sort of mind game with that Dondozo. You know it's stuck into this typing.
Rhydon looking to get the KO onto Tatsugiri before it could move. Joe maybe missed an opportunity to pick up an easy KO on Dondozo as it came in, something like Volt Switch and Giga Drain, but still seems to be in a strong position. Rhydon threatening so much damage with Draco Meteor, now with Hadron Engine on, boosting damage up. We can also pivot back out to threaten electric offense, but no, just quick out with the Draco Meteor. That's going to be a ton of damage into Dondozo.
So much damage. Dondozo already brought down to just a bit of health. Order up into the Volcarona is not that damage that you need. And Volcarona, it's so bulky, and it also has this Citrus Berry. So it's actually going to be ending off better than it started at this point. Going to be the defense raise for this Dondozo, but when you're staring in the face of these two special attackers, that one isn't going to matter too much. Quiver Dance on this turn, maybe you're not necessarily looking to special attack, special defense for this point, but you will get that speed, and that can also be good for this next turn, as well as when you're trying to finish off something like this Tatsugiri.
Right, helpful to have the damage to close out against the Wheezing and the speed to get up over Tatsugiri, and Rhydon looks like it's going to be able to deal with the Dondozo on its own. That was so much damage from the Draco Meteor, and just the same way Dondozo is unaware of the special attack boost on Volcarona, it's unaware of the special attack drop on the Miraidon. So that Draco Meteor is going to come out at just the same power on the next turn. It's looking so difficult for Calvin to come back in this situation, but the Protect is what's there to continue to chip these Pokemon down. You always have the threat of kind of multi-Protect. The Miraidon is not so healthy that it can survive on the field for very many more turns.
Yeah, it looks like it might be able to survive one more, but not past that. But passive turn means the Volcarona can go for another turn of setup. And we're in a position now that if you go for the double Protect and miss it, or you just go for an attack on this next turn, the Dondozo is just going to be KO'd, and this Volcarona will be able to have such a free hit into the Tatsugiri, and it's safety goggles instead of that Focus Sash as well, so it would go down. Now it's whether you do go for this double Protect, or if you want to go for the attack, but Miraidon, again, that will be holding on, so it has one more opportunity to attack.
You have to imagine double Protect is coming. The speed advantage is in Joe's favor, so the double Protect attempted but failed. So now comes another Quiver Dance. The boosts continue to stack for Volcarona, and it's looking very difficult for Calvin.
This Volcarona is all offense all the way. The fail at the double Protect and Draco Meteor, not always the most accurate, but is going to connect. And Dondozo does go down. Only 2 Pokemon left for Calvin in this match. Tatsugiri is going to be forced out onto the field, but again, no Focus Sash, so it is going to be vulnerable to just getting hit on this next turn. Not from the Miraidon at least. That is going to be its last little tango, and the last little bit of poison damage to be taking it down. So that's going to be either the Grimmsnarl to hit the field or the 4th Pokemon, which Joseph hasn't revealed up to this point.
Joe still has 1 Pokemon unrevealed. It is the Iron Hands. It's going to come in and get poisoned as well by the Toxic Spikes. Really, the poison is the main thing Calvin has going for him. Both of these Pokemon have Protect, and so you can imagine some world where enough Protects happen to try to get rid of the Volcarona and put enough damage onto Iron Hands for things to close out, but that's really going to have to be the path. Because Volcarona, with that many speed boosts and with that many damage boosts, you can't give it a free turn to attack, so Calvin just protecting himself, going to start the chip going. I wonder if a Giga Drain to the side, though, just heals up the Volcarona on this turn.
Ooh, I'd love to see it. We definitely see trainers that are not necessarily too scared of side attacking their own Pokemon, and would be a way to definitely boost this Volcarona up to a good point. Is a Giga Drain, and it is into the Iron Hand, so dealing about a third of damage. And now this Volcarona that might have been susceptible to getting KO'd in the next turn or two, especially in a sticky situation if there's the double Protect, is looking a lot healthier. So that win con of just clicking the Protect button as many times, kind of disappearing by the second.
Calvin must be wondering if he just missed an opportunity that was presented in front of him to go out on the offense that turn and try to get the KO on Volcarona, but of course it also had the special defense boost that meant that the Tatsugiri and the Wheezing couldn't do that much damage to it. Now with Protect spent, every future Protect is going to have decreasing and decreasing odds. Terastallization still available for Joe as well to start to resist water with the Volcarona as it becomes a grass type.
Make sure that you're taking away any potential win con into this match, and not just defensive. Make sure you're taking away typing, but it can also be offensive. You have a million boosts at this point, but still all this damage, and you thought you had energy drain from the last time and HP restored. Now you just look so great. Tatsugiri's gone, and now it's only Wheezing at about half health that's stuck around on the field. Iron Hands with the Wild Charge will be enough to get it done, and Joseph Ugarte up 1 in the set.
manages to make it through all the poison. The most crucial moment of that game, though, if you remember all the way back to it, was the turn 1, where Calvin both gave up Terastallization and the restricted Pokemon for absolutely no gain. Just took a Draco Meteor and got one-hit KO'd. Don't know if he just didn't expect the targeting that way or didn't expect to be one-hit KO'd, but this is the devastating blow that meant Calvin was fighting an extremely uphill battle the rest of that game. That's got to be what Calvin's thinking about going into game 2, is if you just get some value out of Crydon, then it did look like the Dondozo mode was chipping in a lot of damage. It was just so much work to do. You really rely with that poison Dondozo mode on damage being put elsewhere. We saw it be effective against Crydon yesterday. It's because a Calyrex Shadow had dealt a Pokemon and a half of damage before Dondozo hit the field, not doing nothing like the Crydon did.
And this Volcarona just got out of control. Of course, when you're sitting there with the Volcarona in front of the Dondozo, yeah, unaware, the special attack, special defense, like, whatever, that's not going to be much. But setting up for that late game, especially in the face of the Dondozo, that with the help of the Reflect, couldn't really damage the opposing end too much. So you got to do the damage that you needed with this Miraidon. The Volcarona just sits there taking boost after boost, and you get to an end game where you can just take down the end. Love the little side target there too, again, when you're looking at it out through poison and protects, where there's a will, there's a way, but quickly closing the door on that when you know that it's going to be, assumingly, a double protect in the face of the poison damage and the fake out. Now for Calvin, where do you switch this up? Because even if it's not a guaranteed KO onto this Koraidon, I feel like you cannot risk your whole top cut on just that survival on the turn. But then where do you switch it up for the game 2?
Right, it's difficult with this kind of construction to not lead the Koraidon if you're going to use the Koraidon, because the mode is really like Koraidon comes out, chips some things, then we go into Dondozo mode. But if you don't think you can safely lead Koraidon because Miraidon will just be there on the opposite side threatening on when it KO, it becomes really unclear where to go. It's part of why it's so important that Calyrex Shadow on these type of teams is so fast, but it is a pivot. It's just into the Flutter Mane and Chi-Yu. I feel like we're back in Regulation B with these two paired up against each other, but threatening a ton of damage. But also no Wheezing means that Prankster is on. That means Light Screen can go before either of these Pokemon attack, and means that Hadron Engine is on. That's free damage for Miraidon against them. Light Screen, we talked about it before the match, really mitigates the damage that Choice Scarf Chi-Yu can do. It means it can't easily get one-hit KOs, and so then it just looks like a little bit more vulnerable with no Protect. And so yeah, it just switches off the field, can't stay there.
It gets out of the way, and that's going to be the Wheezing coming on in. So at least at this point, you shut down the Grimmsnarl, so there isn't a priority, whether you were setting up a Light Screen or trying to go for anything else into this Flutter Mane. But you still have that Hedron Engine, you still have that Electric Train, and that's still going to be a lot of damage done into this Flutter Mane on the very first turn. And Joseph to repivot a Pokemon in. Volcarona will be the one hitting the field. So this is going to be the one to maybe sponge up a bit of that damage from the Flutter Mane. Flutter Mane instead into the Grimmsnarl, though. When you're talking about the impact of that Reflect, Grimmsnarl, one hit KO'd, no screens available for Joseph for the rest of the match.
Right, I think a nice little Matador move of showing the Chi-Yu and then bringing out the Wheezing. Joe probably did click Light Screen on the turn and expected that Light Screen would mean that Moonblast isn't enough damage to KO Grimmsnarl, but because Wheezing hits the field first, there's no more Prankster, so that Light Screen is delayed until the end of the turn, and Moonblast just picks up the KO before it can happen, taking away screens for the rest of this game and giving the first KO, the turn 1 KO over to Calvin this time instead of to Joe. Now, it's not as devastating of a KO, it's just into the Grimmsnarl, not the restricted Pokemon, and now Miraidon can protect itself with Terastallization, but still forward progress from the previous game.
Yeah, this is the Fairy Terastallization, not just good for the protection, but when you're looking at the damage you want to do into the Wheezing, this will be the spread damage. So Flutter Mane gets taken care of, and damage into the Wheezing.
Probably via a speed tie as well. Miraidon and Flutter Mane sharing a speed, and you can see the reaction of both players' faces as Miraidon moves first.
Yeah, so you get the KO, you're not risking that damage. And speed tie, well then you're counting your lucky stars. Volcarona, if you're talking about that speed too, that is the Quiver Dance to just get boosted up yet again. Wheezing, Poison Gas will be poisoning these Pokemon to start going for that win con right here, right now. But yeah, Flutter Mane already taken out of the match.
The poison is helpful, but the poison is often only helpful because Dondozo is there to fill the space, to fill the time that it takes for poison to KO. Well, we know there's no Dondozo this time. The cost of not wanting to lead Koraidon and needing to lead the Flutter Mane and Chi-Yu instead is that there's not space for all of those Pokemon to have the Wheezing and the Flutter Mane and Chi-Yu and then the Dondozo mode. And so it's just Koraidon here in the back, which is a Pokemon that plays at a very different pace. It wants to attack quickly and take a bunch of damage back quickly. That doesn't give a bunch of time for Poison to get the KO. It can still help enable one-hit KOs, this looks like a very uphill battle as Miraidon has terastallized and used that resource up, but Volcarona has gotten a speed boost in the meantime that's going to quickly make it a big problem for Calvin.
At least you know you aren't going to get Draco Meteor KO'd regardless on this turn, but I feel like Miraidon's still in a position. If you are looking at this fairy type move, you still need to terastallize, but at least into the fire type, this isn't going to be a move that's doing as much damage. So Joe is going to be locked into this Dazzling Gleam to just be spreading passive damage across these two Pokemon until he switches out. The Volcarona, though, can go a bit more on the offense, but still is not going to be doing the most damage into the Miraidon anyway. So another round of this Dazzling Gleam, just a bit of chip into both of these Pokemon. And Miraidon, you're getting the boost from the terastallization, you're getting the help from the sun, and into the Volcarona. You do not want to see this bug anymore. Bug off, get out of here. Volcarona is taken down, and Joseph's only has 2 Pokemon left.
Joe down to 2 Pokemon and going to take more damage on the turn as Strange Steam goes into Miraidon, and then poison damage clicks in after. The fire terastallization is so important for Calvin here, both because it resists the Dazzling Gleam that the Miraidon is locked into and really shut down damage options for Volcarona as well. And with just 2 Pokemon, that poison is going to quickly amp up on Miraidon. And critically, we talked before that Choice Scarf Chi-Yu really wants to get one-hit KOs when it's outspeeding Pokemon, and the light's going to be a problem for that. Well, not only is there no light screen, the poison chipping away at Miraidon means that when it hits the field, it's going to have an easy time just outspeeding and KOing the Miraidon. And so Joe really has very few resources left now to close this game with how that previous turn went, with Fire Blitz being enough damage because of the now same type attack boosted damage and the sun damage, the Orichalcum pulse boost on its own to get the KO into Volcarona, and Miraidon just really not threatening that much damage with the Dazzling Gleam resisted.
Yeah, such a different game based off of what this Miraidon wants to do, considering that you're just locked into the Dazzling Gleam. Protect from the Miraidon, because you gotta respect the potential fake out or damage from that Iron Hands that hit the field. Not very effective, but Weezing slowly but surely being chipped down and gonna take advantage of this turn. So Wild Charge into the Weezing will bring Calvin down to final 2 Pokemon as well. But when you are looking at that Chi-Yu with the Scarf in the sun, I still think that's gonna be a dangerous one. But at least there is Assault Vest for this Iron Hands, but can you do enough with these remaining 2 Pokemon?
Yeah, I think there's several bits of damage calculation that are going to be important here, as well. Speed relationship between the Miraidon and the Miraidon. So different ways this could play out. The Chi-Yu could just target down the Miraidon, and then you could try to maybe add extra damage into the Iron Hands with Miraidon. If you miss that KO, then Iron Hands can just Drain Punch into Chi-Yu to build back up. The Flare Blitz recoil will be really significant, but yeah, that seems to be the path it's going. Heat Wave is damage into Miraidon. It's chip into Iron Hands. What does Miraidon do to follow up, and how can Iron Hands hang on?
Yeah, it's all going to be how about this Iron Hands is built. Not taking the most from the Heat Wave, but it's going to be the Flare Blitz, the Terastallization, and the Sun. And if you can get past this in a Drain Punch, you have a chance. But Iron Hand goes down, and switching up the strategy is enough for Calvin to take us now into a Game 3.
A very quick game, not any of the poison stall shenanigans from Dondozo this time around. A bunch of big blows dealt back and forth. The Miraidon, once it's become a fire type and has the sun and the Orichalcum boost, is the same kind of sequence of multipliers that we see from Miraidon when it's using Hadron Engine and Electric Terrain with electric moves. And it means that it has the damage to finish off the Volcarona despite the Volcarona having boosts, to KO the Iron Hands after just that Heat Wave. And really crucial to all of those calculations was the missing screens from Grimmsnarl. That turn 1 play to go out on the offense against Grimmsnarl and get the Moonblast KO before any screens could go up meant that Calvin had the offensive follow-up for all of that. So Weezing necessarily didn't provide some valuable damage with poison, but really crucially turned off Prankster for that turn in a way that shut down part of Joe's game plans.
Well, even the switch up into the Fluttermane for the game number 2, I mean, the Galarian Weezing, Joe was able to handle that later on in the game with other Pokemon, but for the rest of the time, your Miraidon kind of got to feast with his Draking Meteors, and yeah, either you Terastallize out of being a super effective hit and it's a neutral hit and you still take the KO, or you just do some great damage. But now when you have the Fluttermane in front of you and opting to go for that Dazzling Gleam and Calvin just taking down partner Pokemon, being locked into it, that wasn't the damage that you needed. And you were taking the hits. You weren't taking the hits because of the Miraidon being gone. So do you still want to lead the Miraidon into this third match, or do you switch it up and maybe have the restrict in the back?
Into the pair of Koraidon and Flutter Mane, the choice specs are actually difficult because there's nothing safe to lock into. If you lock into Electric moves, you don't do much damage. Into Koraidon, Dragon moves, you can't damage. Flutter Mane, Fairy moves, you can't damage Fire-type Koraidon. And so, no option feels great. But we're back to the Game 1 game plan with Weezing next to Koraidon. It'll be interesting to see if Calvin has the same things in the back, if it is the Dondozo mode, which makes it very difficult to switch the Koraidon out in this position, or if there's any better options faced with that same threat of Draco Meteor coming in from Miraidon.
And these are the same leads that we had in the game 1. And reminder, it was a Miraidon Draco Meteor into this Koraidon, and it was a one-hit KO then, and it's a one-hit KO now. Maybe not anticipating that Joe would just click the super effective damage button, but that is restricted, gone right away. You saved your Terastallization, but at what cost? Strange Team into the Grimmsnarl, you only do half. Now Light Screen is up. You're not going to be taking damage from too much in the back. Okay, from those ones you will, but now you have the next turn, next opportunity to set up the Reflect. But what a devastating blow from the get-go.
Yeah, just once again, we get a repeat of game 1 with Draco Meteor just going into Miraidon and getting the KO. Terastallization not spent is a little bit of a win for Calvin. You still have it for probably Dondozo later on, but I think it's still just an absolutely devastating blow. Nothing is forcing Miraidon off the field here either. It can continue to throw Draco Meteors at Tatsugiri. Tatsugiri, no matter the special attack drop, is still going to get KO. It's going to force Dondozo in the same awkward way that Dondozo came in game 1. It's all kind of looking like a repeat in a way that did not work out in Calvin's favor.
And Terastallization spent here just in case this little Tatsugiri on the opposing end isn't protecting and is trying to maybe go for a Draco Meteor. You can make sure that this is just not going to be doing that damage. Tatsugiri protecting though, and you still have just a safe button. You click the Draco Meteor, and if you think that it's just going to be a Poison Gas, well then you can set up Reflect with the Grimmsnarl to get that second layer of screens up to make sure once Dondozo hits the field, you're also good. Poison Gas, of course, we'll see that just kind of take away the Pokemon, but again, we saw this same path happen in this game number 1, and it just wasn't enough poison damage over the time with the amount of momentum that Joseph was able to take, and there it is. That is the Reflect, so once the Dondozo does hit the field, well, that's still not the most damage.
Right, the damage is really all about the poison now. It's can Dondozo last long enough? And I think that makes this next turn and how the switches happen really crucial. It's very risky to leave Tatsugiri on the field without bringing in Dondozo. We saw the Terastallization maybe threaten there, so maybe that is the game plan. Just try to be not weak to Draco Meteor and be able to take one attack just to delay the inevitable. Because it is so, if you telegraph a Dondozo switch into the other slot, then it's very easy to capitalize on it with an early Draco Meteor and punish it. So now just Tatsugiri, Terastallization, what happens?
I mean, Draco Meteor, you are at -2, so this is going to be a Tatsugiri that takes the hit. But when you're looking at the muddy water, maybe playing for even just accuracy drops, playing for any sort of out that you have. Accuracy drop on the Grimmsnarl, but you're kind of maybe hoping that was into the Miraidon instead. But at least this damage, the Grimmsnarl is gone. But Grimmsnarl's kind of done what it's needed to do at this point. I think the one thing with this muddy water is if you do bring the Volcarona in, you could be threatened. But again, that's a Miraidon that could just click the button into you, do the damage, take down the Tatsugiri, and then that means no setup for your Dondozo.
Right, it would mean if you obviously can't risk Tatsugiri just going down, but I think it's really important that Calvin made it through that turn, right? This is all about how many turns you make it through in order to get poison damage onto Miraidon, maybe poison damage onto Volcarona successfully. That was a turn where Tatsugiri couldn't protect. Now Tatsugiri can protect again, so it can also forward you further into the game. And Tatsugiri survives, uses that resource of the Terastallization, but maybe a resource that wasn't going to be crucial for Dondozo later on, in order to just go one turn further into this game. To some extent, that's got to be Calvin's motto here, is just take it one turn at a time, stay alive, and don't lose too much. Because at some point, Dondozo has to come in, and you have to do it without getting punished too hard for it.
A switch going to be from both trainers. Joseph taking the Miraidon off of this field and bringing Iron Hands in instead. As Weezing is finally going to take his exit. When you're looking at Tatsugiri, that's not the healthiest at this stage of the match. Bringing in the Dondozo, if you ever wanted to have the Commander ability, this would more so be that moment. So now Dondozo hits the field, Commander goes off, and we'll get to see a bunch of animations. But now there's an Iron Hands on the opposing end of the field, ready, poised, with a fake out. And if you think there's a protect, well, this is where Volcarona can get set up.
The really awkward part about bringing in Dondozo into that slot is that these Pokemon aren't poisoned yet. And so you're really going to be relying on actual damage from Dondozo, and with the Reflect to mitigate that, that's going to be really difficult to find. Even without special attack boosts from Volcarona, Giga Drain is still going to be healing any damage that you do back up and mitigating what damage is coming back. You're going to risk Flame Body every time you go into it, and so yeah, really difficult without getting the poison first to win from this position. And there's no chance to get the poison now. You're locked into the Tatsugiri and the Dondozo.
Going to be saving the Volcarona for now with a little bit of a swap and bringing the Miraidon back into the field. But this can be a safe swap here too. And yeah, bringing this Electric Drain back, Cork Drive, Iron Hands will do even more. Won't really matter for that turn since it is a fake out. Keep the Dondozo honest and safe. Let you get this safe swap. But now this Miraidon can threaten so much damage, and so can the Iron Hands.
Right, the damage is coming in. Terrestrialization has been spent, so Miraidon is safe to just go for electric offense here and really punish this Dondozo. It might just be a KO. We've already seen that Miraidon is faster than Dondozo, even with its speed boost. And all of that is then with a Volcarona behind it for the future, but for now, just to protect, maybe a long sequence of protects required to get the poison damage onto Miraidon.
Yeah, but when the Miraidon's the only one that's poisoned and still at a decent amount of health, that is going to be a wild sequence. And when you're taking this damage from the Iron Hands as well and don't have the Terrestrialization to get out of it, you're getting hit on both effects.
Well, the Electro Drift should just be enough damage. It's Hydron Engine boosted, super effective with the extra multiplier for Electro Drift, super effective damage. I'd be surprised if it isn't a one-hit KO. And so then Wild Charge would just follow up and KO the Tatsugiri behind that. We'll see. Electro Drift into Dondozo.
It's going to be a lot of damage, and it's going to be all the damage. Super effective. Multipliers on multipliers, and Dondozo one-hit KO. You don't get to see that one every day, but for all the Dondozo deniers out there, be nice once in a while. Wild Charge, Tatsugiri was already so low, and forced out onto the field will be a double KO to take care of the infamous duo. And now it's going to be the lifeline of the team, Weezing, the only Pokemon left, but with too tall of a task ahead of it.
Absolutely too tall of a task. Just can't deal with these Pokemon. Really great opportunistic play from Joe to recognize that on the turn Dozo switched in and Volcarona got a Quiver Dance, to recognize, oh, there's nothing stopping a fake out and switch to Miraidon, and then Electro Drift will eventually land. Give up on the Quiver Dance, give up on whatever game plan was being thought of before. There is a two-turn sequence that gets to a one-hit KO on Dondozo. Follow that, get the KO, win the game, move on.
And Electro Drift, one last KO. Weezing is gone, and with that, Joseph Ugarte 2-1 to be moving along here in our top cut. This team has been piloted by him since the World Championships. The team couldn't do it then, but it's been popping off in Regulation 2.0 and one step further to trying to make its way to the Onto Finals.
2 times Draco Meteor came out on turn 1 and KO'd a Koraidon, and both times Joe ends up winning that game. Calvin just giving up